spoke of call centers being closed in Region 10. But I wish to remind the honorable member, it was the PPPC that closed Bartram Collins College. It was the PPPC that withdrew support from night schools. It was the PPPC, sir, that cut subvention from other institutions. Yes, it was the PPPC. As a matter of fact, Chair, 30 community health workers were dismissed from Region 4. And here they come, crying foul as if they are the innocent ones. Yes, look in the mirror. The Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, took pains to outline to us communities that receive flood relief. But what he did not disclose was the money received by one person of those communities as against others of the same community and other communities. Sir, I wonder if the criteria used to provide those flood reliefs are the same criteria used that provided $250,000 to the sugar workers, which was said here, the criteria then is care, compassion, and love. What is even more worrying, sir, the Honorable Minister is responsible for Gaisuku, and he said little or nothing about that sector during its 30 minutes deliberation. And I'm quite certain, sir, before the end of this year, the Honorable Member will come once again asking for increase for Gaisuku, like was done in the previous years. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I will not allow myself to be burdened by the fallacies of those who seek to portray themselves as apostles and pastors. Dream on. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the budget debate, which was presented to this noble house by the senior minister within the office of the president with responsibility for finance on January 26, 2022. Mr. Speaker, this budget was presented under the theme steadfast against all challenges, resolute in building our one Guyana. I do believe it is not by accident this theme was chosen, but rather, Mr. Speaker, it is the intent of the PPPC to continue along the path of providing chicken feed and peanut to our working class people in this country. The truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, men and women in uniform, teachers, nurses, doctors, sweeper cleaners, etc., waited anxiously to see what's in the budget for them. But sad to say, an uncaring group of people once again shattered their hopes. The budget has not only added frustration and depression to our nation, but it further seeks to maintain the economic hardship and widen the gap between the super rich and filthy poor. Mr. Speaker, I try to dissect phrases. I recognize the word steadfast, and I also realize it to be loyal, committed, devoted, dedicated, and even dependable. What the senior minister and the installed PPPC has said to the Guyanese people in this 2022 budget, hold a strain, the worst is yet to come. Hakuna Matata. Yes, Mr. Speaker, disrespectful and discriminatory to the working class of people in this country. Against all challenges, 3 budgets, one that speaks to economic dynamism, another building our One Guyana. In the rise of COVID, nothing to ease the economic hardship and other social issues brought to bear. In fact, all the PPPC government is concerned about is siphoning off the patrimony of this country to their friends and supporters, while the small man, yes, the real man, continues to see hopelessness and despair. Is this the oneness and One Guyana of which we speak? Certainly not. Your attitude says the direct opposite. One would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that the feedback after 18 months, this budget would have been people-centered. Mr. Speaker, the phrase One Guyana is being used by all the members of the other side. But it's worrying to see how this One Guyana is being realized. When there's the continuing dictatorial and discriminatory practices of senior government officials and their cronies being used to control every aspect which lends itself to lifting all Guyanese out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to region number 4. The Honorable Member Vince Roy Jordan would have used a broad brush as he outlined to us what has happened in all the regions of Guyana. And so I will focus my attention on some specific issues. It's a travesty, sir, to see how the One Guyana is demonstrated for this region when the elected officials by the people and for the people were locked out of a process which determined what is in the budget for them. But let me tell you, sir, the Honorable Nigel Dharamlal, Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, was warned in this very house to be mindful of the legacy he will leave behind and not to return this country to a green and red state. But tell you what, the same thing has continued. Mr. Speaker, I want to look at a term that would have been used some time back and coin it to modern day language. You can take a pig out of the mud, dress it up in Gucci, drove it in Lamborghini to the most exotic places, provided with the most expensive meals and all of that. But say what? That pig will drive that vehicle down in the mud because that is what the pig is accustomed to. The pig will remain a pig. Whether you give it lipstick or you give it lip gloss, it will remain a pig. That's the characteristics of pigs. Sir, I am not surprised by the action portrayed by the region, for the region and municipality that is not controlled by the PPPC. These regions are being discriminated and marginalized against. It's a shame to know the most populated region is seen as insignificant to the people who are asking us to be resolute in building One Guyana. Sir, The office of the regional chairman and the mayor of Georgetown continue to be disrespected, even though they continuously ask to be allowed to do their job without interference. Worst, Mr. Speaker, the regional chairman office of region number 4, the largest region, was provided with least funding with this largest budget that is being touted in an oil booming economy. As a matter of fact, what was received by Region 4 is a decrease from last year and the other years. Add to that, Mr. Speaker, $3 million were given as subvention to the Neighborhood Democratic Council. When the coalition took government in 2015, these subventions were increased from $3 million to $5 million. Sir, the management of that sum has now been taken away from the RDC and placed back in the hands of the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, who dictate how that money is to be spent. Is this how we promote One Guyana? When we want to manage and control things from the center, Mr. Speaker, I've listened to councillors of the NDCs along the East Coast and East Bank corridors, and stories given to you are the same. They said, and I quote, "We cannot do what we have to do for the citizens because we are controlled and confined to what the office of the minister wants us to do," end of quote. Sir, those subvention was used for capital works, bridges, patching of roads, even purchasing of machinery, tractor, trailer, etc. But here we have that daddy who is saying to the elected officials they must purchase street lights and or aggregate, and also dictate how much of that money is to be spent on what? Like my colleague, Honorable Michael said, the light on my phone is brighter than those $35,000 lights. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to healthcare services.
Honorable member, before you can turn your attention there, we will need an extension.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude.
Thank you, honorable member. You may proceed to conclude.
I now turn my attention to healthcare services, Mr. Speaker. These services were boosted under the APNU AFC. Mr. Speaker, in the rise of COVID, we recognize that there's a couple of things need to be changed. Mr. Speaker, I would have visited with Tamara, who would have gone to Paradise testing site to be tested. Mr. Chair, Tamara said to me she got there at 7:30, waited on 9:30 for services to be provided to her. 11 o'clock, Mr. Chair, Tamara was still there waiting. Mr. Chair, because of time constraint, and I only have 5 minutes at hand, I wish to point to another area. I stopped to grab a couple of bags of food for my dogs. There, Mr. Speaker, I interacted with the saleswoman who told me her name was Sunita. Sunita had 3 children there by her side. As the conversation ensued, I learned that Miss Sunita was also employed as a sweeper cleaner. She said as a single parent, in order to be able to send her children to school and adequately provide for them, she had to revert to alternative means of sustenance. This, sir, moved me, and I salute her with both hands. A strong woman, a mother who is willing to give her best to her children in spite of the economic hardship being faced. I heard of the Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa rant and rave about dog food sellers. May I remind him, it was Sunita who said to me she preferred to sell dog food rather than to be selling cocaine and her name go down in the statistics of Guyana. As a matter of fact, she also said to me she applied for public assistance since January of 2021, and to date she has not received any feedback. Is this the one Guyana we talk about? As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I bring to you real experiences faced by citizens of this land, which has resulted from the economic hardship that brought to bear. And I say to you, sir, because of this and other reasons, time did not permit me to give you all the facts I have here. And so, sir, I will not support this budget since it did not prepare and cater for the real issues and needs of the small man. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Our next speaker is the Honorable Member, Ms. Bagmati Veerasan.
Good afternoon, Facebook followers. We're here again. I'm Shanika Haynes, giving you a bit of an update from the opposition side of the House on the Budget 2022 debates as we go through. We had lots of debates today. I mean, the opposition members have been exposing this misery of a budget that the government thought it fit to read to the nation after um, telling us, and ensuring that it is the largest budget that includes the oil revenue. So we're here again, and with me this afternoon, I have the Shadow Minister of Finance, Ms. Jorita Fernandez. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
I rather suspect, with the government's decision to ensure that NCN does not play the opposition members budget presentations. Miss Fernandez, you may be one of those reasons. I mean, all of the debates are awesome, but I mean, when you hit them with those figures and those numbers and show them how lacking they are, the entire room practically went silent.
You know, the thing is, it was my numbers. I didn't have to generate numbers.
Mhm.
Basically, I pulled the numbers from their presentation. That's why I walk with the budget book. Because I basically said, this is what you projected, this is what you delivered, and now you're projecting something else. I went on to say that you projected these things in amidst the COVID pandemic. So you projected these numbers with COVID in mind. So COVID cannot be used as an excuse any further. So when you bring the facts, I mean, they will go shout and scream afterwards because that's their job. That's what they're getting paid to do, basically. But you can't refute the numbers. The numbers are what they are. We can't say anything different. But as it pertains to what you commented on about NCN not carrying the streaming, so it is sad that the staff at NCN, and I know the staff is being instructed
Yes,
not to
they
take this is not
definitely
their
are.
fault or anything like that. But at the helm of it, we have Kwame McCoy, and he's instructing them not to carry the feed. But I dare say it doesn't harm us. 58 persons watching NCN. What are we losing, right? So it
Correct,
doesn't
correct.
really harm us, the viewership and so forth. We have our platforms that takes all. We'll see this evening. Mr. Duncan is going to go. He's going to do a review. He's going to have over 5,000 persons watching. We're not losing anything by them doing that.
That's true. But I mean, we know this because the PPP government ministers, as they present their budget, they're trying to paint this picture, and the budget of itself, the team talks about a one Guyana, one Guyana, one Guyana. But here we see them using state media that is funded by all
But
taxpayers,
my
not
money,
some. Your money, my
my
money.
money, yes.
You understand? And they are not giving to us both sides of the debate because they understand that the budget they have presented really, really, really has nothing for the people. And they are afraid that right thinking Guyanese will view both sides of the presentation and automatically see the folly
Yes.
in the budget.
Well, from my presentation, I tried my best to give the numbers as much as I
Yes,
possibly
you
could,
did.
but we only have 30 minutes, and then you have an extension of five
Five.
minutes, and basically you utilize all of that. I think my presentation actually went over by almost 4 minutes. So
Yeah.
we try to pack in the information, but there's so much. I know the Ashley Singh, he was allowed 5 hours plus to go and read out whatever he believes is fitting.
Right.
And then we have these little segments to go and rebut. We just have a meager half an hour to actually go and rebut what he said. So there's so much to rebut. It's crazy.
Yes,
but
yes.
but what is more astonishing is that we don't have to go looking for this information.
It's in the budget report.
He delivered it himself. This is not something that we're making up. He said, and we can go to it. I can tell.
Yes, you
persons-
can go. I mean, I like the way you explain with pains the numbers that he gave to us
Yes.
and how it sits, and even your illustration to ensure the honorable.
But he wasn't following. Usually he heckles
You-
tremendously, but
Yes.
but he was silent today. I must say that. So I know I had to just break it down a little bit so that he would understand
Understand.
what is being said. But persons can go. I noticed this budget speech is
It's
actually
online too.
online.
Yeah.
Ministry of Finance page. You can go look at from page 7. There's the sectorial performance and so forth.
Yeah.
But what they did is they propped up the nation to believe in 2021 they were going to come and they're going to do this great development for our country, and they're going to come because the coalition was so horrible. That's what they said. The coalition was so horrible, they did not know what they're doing, and they're going to correct this and correct, especially sugar.
Yes.
Today they have not only they have to face the harsh reality that projections they made of expansion, they have to report now that it's contracted, it has declined. So how do they come back and rebut that? You mean you shout and scream? It doesn't change the fact
Correct.
that you have
Fact
failed.
is fact.
You failed.
Fail, fail, fail. You know,
It's
all
a
the
report
F.
card. Basically, it's a report card that they were forced to give to themselves. There's a lot of talking that could be done, but when it comes to the statistic and the statistical analysis altogether, you can just go on and on and on, shouting, and the PUP has perfected the art of saying absolutely nothing in very lengthy speeches.
Correct.
If you go and listen to them, they don't bring any facts, or they would go and say, the honorable member don't know what she's saying, but they're not going to say specifically what I was incorrect with because there's nothing for them to say that this is what I was incorrect with.
Yeah.
You can't go and say that, oh, we didn't project that and we didn't deliver this. The numbers is right there. That's what it's saying. But you're going to go and say, oh, well, they don't know what they're saying, but that's all they can say.
We definitely have to do a chart for them. I mean, for the
Definitely.
breakdown, we will ensure that we get a chart up there with all those numbers and the lovely arrows, which are going to be pointing down mostly.
Yeah, sadly.
Sadly, for
Sadly.
this country, it will be pointing down. To give a proper illustration of what this budget really presents every time, three budgets in. Three budgets in. And this is what we're dealing with. We had one of the honorable members say that the speaker before, Ms. Coretta McDonald, was delusional in her representation of what was happening in the Upper Mazaruni, an area that he's from, and he's been sitting in Parliament for two budgets. And he stood there to blame the APNU AFC government. I mean, you are a government MP in your neighborhood. The school is deplorable,
You know,
and you're still blaming, after two budgets, you're still blaming the APNU.
well, Mr. Williams, I can say this. I know that there are persons asking online, who is this person? Because
Yeah, nobody knows
That's
it.
how often that he comes out and he actually appears to the public. They are members of the a vast number of members on the government side that is only allowed to speak once, and when everyone have to speak during the budget debates. There's several of them. Mr. Williams is one. I've never heard Mr. Williams been given the privilege to actually come and present on any matter of substance or significance on any bill or anything for that matter. Kwame McCoy is one of them. I've never
That's
heard Kwame
true,
McCoy
true.
debated any bill or anything like that because they have a purpose in the National Assembly, and it's not to represent the people. It's not to formulate policies. That's not
Correct.
their purpose. So they have a different purpose. To come and even make a statement like that, oh, they're delusional. You know, it sounds nice and catchy. Oh, that person is delusional. But point out how? In what
Yeah.
way? Is the statistics saying this? Or do you have stats that says differently? And they can't do that.
But he said it himself. He gave the facts of who is actually delusional, which is himself. Because you're saying the opposition side left office in 2020.
This is
We're in
2022.
2022, and you are complaining about works in a school. Therefore, you are delusional, sir.
Yeah, well, I think he needs to have a conversation with the Minister of Education. Because
Definitely.
the Minister of Education has been touting this awesome budget and all of that. I think he need to have a conversation with her as how to go forward with that. Because oftentimes, and I can speak to this matter because I come from Region 7 in Bartica,
Yeah.
and I can speak to the matter. That oftentimes you come and there's just great projections, and the money is being spent centrally, and that is a sad reality. And if you don't have proper representation for those areas, persons are left with the tail end. And if the only representation we've heard thus far from Mr. Williams is for him to come and say the honorable member is delusional, then he is to be blamed for what is going on. Then
Correct.
he is the
Correct.
representative.
Correct is right. Correct is right. We will continue with conversations with all our MPs as we go through for the few days remaining for the budget speeches. We'll take a little break as we bring in Honorable Vince Roy Jordan, who gave a beautiful presentation as well this morning
As
as he
always.
represented his geographical region in fashion and style to bring the facts and the truth of what the budget really holds for the people. Welcome back. We have with us Honorable Vince Roy Jordan, the representative for Region Number 5. I mean, his budget presentation today was an excellent one where he covered what that budget really has for the region. And it is very sad that with all that has been happening, and again, we boast of oil revenues. When we talk about the non oil revenue GDP, they're telling us we have to add it, but yet still there is no show in the allocations to our regions on with this. Today, you talked a lot about what was happening in the region, and you pointed out some of the things that would be purchased for the region with the monies that are allocated. And it's surprising that that's all it can do.
Yeah. You see, thank you very much, Shanika. When it comes to my region, I take it serious to ensure that I look at what happens in my region and what is given to my region. And when I looked at public health, I recognized that it was only empty. It was empty in the sense that nothing significant was going to public health. And when I examined the um, when I examined the full content of public health, I recognized that the only thing that stood out was a new ambulance to be bought, one bus, I don't know if it's a 40-seat bus or if it's a 30-seat bus, oxygen lines and supply of oxygen for two health centers and the Myconi Hospital, and the living quarters to be built at the Myconi Hospital, which already has a portion of living quarters there.
Uh-huh.
So it was so sad to understand that in this oil rich economy that we speak about and boast about day after day, that only 14.7% of increase could have been.
Welcome back. We're sorry about the break. We've been having a little of technical difficulties in between. Yes, and we're still speaking with the Honorable Vince Roy Jordan from Region Number 5, representing the opposition MPs. He was just giving us a little breakdown about the public health sector. I noted as well in your speech, you talked about really what we see in the entire budget is a neglect for different classes of people. People with different beliefs and different areas have been neglected in this budget. And I heard you in your speech talked about Lovely Lass and these areas that have not really received anything. Could you highlight that for us?
Yeah, I'm happy that you asked that question, or asked me rather to highlight. Um, what is really happening in this budget is only the uh, extension to what they started with in terms of marginalization and discrimination from the 2021 budget. What we see here is a number of villages that are supporting the coalition number one, that are deemed to be 100% Afro-Guyanese community, that are deemed to be people who would not entertain the likes of the PPPC. And because of those 3 pointers, they frontally refuse to give to them any sort of government support. You find that in villages, like I mentioned, Belladrum, Lovely Lass, Ithaca,
Number
number
five,
28, Trafalgar, number 5. Those villages would not have received any works in terms of public works in that area from the government from the time they took office. I can tell you from my village, for example, before we left office, there was a street in my village already on plan. And because it was already on plan, that was the only street completed in my village in the almost 2 years in office for this government. 3 budgets.
All right.
And in places like Belladrum and Ithaca, Hopetown, not one street. The PPP is so shameless in what they do. They just don't care. And then the regional MP could come to this house and say that they love all the people in Region 5. They're doing works in all the communities. But I brought it out specifically to show by fact that their budget is saying that they're doing works in Bushlot, they're doing works in Cotton Tree, they're doing works in Bad Settlement, they're doing works in Waterloo, in number 10 village, and most significantly in Mahaika, Dihu Branch Road, where the regional chairman lives. The road will stop, the extension of the road to the best part of it will stop in the very community number 10, Dihu Michael, where the regional chairman lives.
That's very sad, very, very sad. And like I said, that is what is reflected throughout the budget and throughout the regions. Basically, we are seeing this neglect and discrimination across the board. I had the privilege of going into Ithaca, and in terms of agriculture, it's the same. The neglect is there. They had equipment taken away. I mean,
Definitely.
the roads into the farm after the flood, it is so significant. The roads are terrible going into those farms, and those persons, the farmers in that area, had no assistance from the
From the
government.
government.
They actually took back from the program
The
that
raid.
that the raid program that was started under the AP and UMC government. They took back some of those equipment, and when the farmers realized what was happening, they were able to secure the tractor. So right now, the only piece of equipment they have there is the tractor,
The tractor.
to assist them on the road to get in there. There is no proper drainage planning because now they don't have the equipment to do the drainage and keep it clear, etc. So we're seeing this throughout the regions, and we're seeing it clearly in the budget. This is what we're seeing. I was happy to have this conversation with you. We have another, I think it's Miss Nicolette, Honorable Nicolette Henry is about to make her presentation, and we would want to go live on that. Thank you for having this conversation with us, and stay tuned. We'll keep you informed with what is happening in the Parliament of Guyana.
Thank you, Shane.
is the mention of any specific intervention to address the learning losses brought on by the pandemic. I don't know anyone who would agree that a disruption to the education system occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic would have created learning gaps that absolutely need to be bridged. Unprecedented times, Mr. Speaker, calls for unprecedented solutions. The routine of the past, as captured in the 2022 budget, is unlikely to be adequate. I have to say that a structured, thoughtful approach to covering missed content and providing interventions and remediations will help our students catch up. And I believe carefully managing resources will also help to fuel that effort. Mr. Speaker, in looking at Budget 2022, I noticed headlines such as improved school building infrastructure, improving access through cash grants, textbooks, science kits, etc. And these are routine measures which are important and which we are accustomed to here in Guyana, but which by themselves cannot provide the transformational shifts required to rebound the sector, especially during and after the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, from the numerous analyses done locally and beyond, a number of areas were identified as requiring interventions in order for Guyana to have an effective human capital development effort that would transform the nation's knowledge base, skill sets, and attitudes, particularly among our youth population. Mr. Speaker, the history of the education sector suggests that the identifying weaknesses in key academic areas, such as English, maths, and sciences, unprepared sector staff, inadequate infrastructure, and equipment, can be remedied by time and money, given the countervailing strengths and opportunities. By the same token, history suggests that mere time and money will not remove or even reduce the threats, such as inherent inefficiency and ineffectiveness. There are also diverse distractions that may lead to dispersions of positive energy and the other challenges that have stymied progress, and all of which are more likely to be effectively addressed through significant behavioral change in diverse groups. Mr. Speaker, effecting significant behavioral change in education would require reorientation, retraining, attitudinal shifts, shifts in perceptions, public education, socio-political dialogue and discussion, accommodation, and acceptance of diversity in thinking and doing. Effecting such change would require even more time and funds, and would not be a purely linear technical process with relative predictable input and output relationships. Mr. Speaker, additionally, several of the non-school-based interventions, which also have to be implemented to allow for a more holistic approach. I'm on record of saying, and I repeat again, that the people of this country have every right to believe in a better life as we proceed to develop our nation from year to year and from administration to administration. Along the way on this journey, Mr. Speaker, there have been and will always be highs and lows, twists and turns, but that is life. It is how we respond as a country that will determine the efficiency, efficacy, and effectiveness of the leadership which is brought to bear on our circumstances. whatever they may be. Mr. Speaker, I am saying today that special emphasis must be placed on our most vulnerable children, and we must take every opportunity afforded to reach those furthest behind first. And I will deal with that a little more aptly later in my presentation. I have to say that the coalition is proud of its record in the education sector, and I stand here today to defend that. School attendance and schools performance improved as a result of the initiatives such as the public education transportation system, which was aimed at combating high truancy and dropout rates by providing boats, buses, bicycles, and also the public education nutrition service, which we call here school feeding, provided breakfast to our children. Mr. Speaker, we must leverage the gains we have made as a country. We cannot rest, and we should not rest as a nation until every child's need is addressed and every child's potential is fulfilled. The Coalition Decade of Development Plan for Education adumbrated the need to transform the education sector into a vibrant, viable 21st century, ready and able to support national development and to afford the opportunity of every Guyanese to benefit from an education of the highest quality. Some of the policy shifts, Mr. Speaker, as they currently are, will not allow us to realize these aspirations. The Inter-American Development Bank report, which highlights that although enrollment at the primary and secondary level continues to be relatively high, the quality of schooling varies as our children's performance at the Caribbean Examination Council is below Caribbean average. Similarly, we must not dismiss nor take lightly the World Bank's concern that due to the pandemic, student engagement has been lowered in Guyana, leading to concerns of learning losses. It is further projected, Mr. Speaker, that these losses and dropout rates will have great implications for the accumulation of human capital in countries. Mr. Speaker, in light of this projection, the education sector should outline in its 2022 program the strategic interventions that can avert the great implications. Central to such an intervention should be a national human capital development scheme. And the coalition is proposing that this national human capital development scheme addresses a key strategic aspiration that must be achieved if Guyana is to remain viable even after the oil and gas era. And more importantly, if Guyanese are to be competitive in and outside of Guyana. A national human capital development scheme is a public good that generates significant returns at individual, household, community, and national levels. The proposed National Human Capital Development Scheme is intended to fast-track the recapitalization of our human capital base, which in turn fuels public education. Mr. Speaker, this has two critical dimensions, speed and reach, both of which will anticipate and address national demand for post-secondary expertise. Thus, the Human Capital Scheme would, one, move 100% of our children through all stages of basic education. Secondly, it will ensure 100% of children earn a terminal secondary credential, whether it be CSEP, CAPE, or GCSE, or whatever its equivalent. Thirdly, it will move 100 secondary school graduates through some form of post-secondary education, whether academic, professional, technical, or vocational. Fourthly, it will move 90% of holders of bachelor's degree to some form of postgraduate or specialized academic, professional, or technical education, including terminal professional degrees. Number 5, it will move 80% of graduates of holders of master's degrees to doctoral degrees. And it will ensure and it should ensure all public servants earn a specified number of hours of continuing education for an agreed period. And finally, if we look at number 3, 4, and 5, which together are essential to maintain, sustain, and enhance the education and training of trainees, they are not standalone interventions, and they should intersect and interact with all other initiatives. While there is no mention in the budget, Mr. Speaker, to indicate how the licensing of teachers will be operationalized, it is something that was publicized by the Ministry of Education to be undertaken in 2022. And of course, it is one of the recommendations that came out of the Education COI Commission by the coalition. In this regard, the coalition proposes that a national evaluation, licensing, and certification system be established. As the proposed national evaluation, licensing, and certification system will provide a platform and means to support professional associations, establish standards and mechanisms for evaluation, licensing, and certification in line with international standards and best practices. Mr. Speaker, this will also allow for better stakeholders' engagement and knowledge management that will be integral to operationalizing the plan, and it will enhance professionalism across the productive sector and support professionals and remain current in their profession. The National Evaluation, Licensing, and Certification System can also provide support for the review and audit of standards and procedures for self-evaluations and preparation for accreditation. I trust that we will get a better understanding of this important initiative when the subject minister delivers her presentation. I'm calling on the government that, given Guyana's new economic realities and the fact that there are still dense but significant pockets of this population who can't afford to support their family's education, I can tell you it will take more than cash transfers to improve access to quality education. Mr. Speaker, in 2022, this coalition is calling on the government to relook at its program and ensure more targeted interventions are included as we understand the benefits of public education transportation service and public education nutrition service that provided our children with breakfast. And Mr. Speaker, we understand that these have far-reaching effects, and they're also evidence-based. According to the United Nations, there is evidence to show that public education nutrition service program enhance enrollment in school and better educational outcomes. I wish to add that increased educational achievement will improve students' potential future productivity and earnings, all of which are important to a good life. Let me remind members in this honorable House that it was the coalition in 2018 for the first time in over a decade that reintroduced training about teachers in Region 8. I listened then to my colleague, who is now the Minister of Education on the other side of the House, saying that 77% of trained teachers would not help us. Today, that honorable member is singing a different tune because she's in a different seat. I have to say that the literature is complete with evidence of the benefits of having trained teachers in classrooms. This measure will not only help us, but would also ensure that all of our regions throughout the length and breadth of Guyana are reached. I'm happy to see that this measure to widen the breadth and scope of teachers' training is still on the cards. Mr. Speaker, our collective efforts should always be to put the people first. I realize, perhaps more than many others, that transforming the education system will not be easy, and that we are likely to encounter a lot of challenges along the way. And so I had a lot of fixing to do as a minister and a member of the coalition. And we had to make things more appropriate. We had to ensure that they reach acceptable standards, such as we know the fixing of the Cato Secondary School. Let me say to the people of this country, and I wish to repeat, whether you live in Lethem or Linden, Babu John or Covent John, they all benefited from the coalition's holistic plan in education. Transforming the education system is a necessary journey that we all have to take as one people, one nation, with one destiny. Mr. Speaker, there must be continuity for maximum efficacy. It was during the coalition term in office that for the first time in over a decade, we conducted a condition survey of all of our schools across this country. And we used that data for maintenance and infrastructural works to be undertaken by the Ministry of Education. We need another survey, Mr. Speaker. In keeping with international best practices for a high-performing education system, the Ministry of Education needs to continue to prioritize special education needs. As numerous children in this country were needlessly enduring the horror of academic underperformance due to lack of appropriate cognitive, social, and emotional support, care, and treatment options. The evidence is saying to us that these conditions are treatable and perhaps preventable. And with early diagnosis and treatment, we need to pay attention to that cohort of students. And it is for that reason in 2018 that the coalition on my stewardship outfitted the newly constructed Special Education Diagnosis and Assimilation Center at Turkine with appropriate equipment and furnishing. For much too long, Mr. Speaker, because of the absence of a specific diagnostic and assimilation facility, many of our children were left to develop in full-blown conditions at a tremendous personal cost and at a society loss in later years. Mr. Speaker, the education sector must go into every community and reach those students requiring special education needs, because they were put at a further disadvantage due to the pandemic. As I've always posited, another strategic and operational shift required to achieve the vision of first-class education in Guyana is the strengthening of the technical and vocational education, particularly in our hinterland regions. And that is why in 2018, the coalition initiated construction of technical and vocational education and training hubs at Bina Hill, Madhya, Lethem, and Mabruma to bridge the gap between hinterland and coastland, while enhancing hinterland access to post-secondary education opportunities. Speaking of post-secondary opportunities, Mr. Speaker, the modernization of the University of Guyana must continue to be a priority for this country. I have to say here that when we came into government as a coalition, even the University of Guyana's most ardent supporters would have admitted that the university was in danger of stagnation, to bring a sense of pride and augustness to this institution. We have, among other things, Mr. Speaker, accomplished in 2017 the regional accreditation of the medical school, and this was long overdue. We will, on this side of the House, continue to advocate for alignment along the entire education value chain as we harness our resources. And as I seek to wind up my presentation, Mr. Speaker, please allow me to quote one of the world's greatest political icons of this 21st century. It will be the great Nelson Mandela who said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made in the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we live." Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of work to be done in the education sector, with the sole purpose of making a difference in the lives of the people in this country. The people in this country are looking at you, and they are counting on us. As a responsible government, it is your duty to make the difficult strategic decisions, and we as a country will have to continue to find innovative solutions to close the gaps and reduce the disparities in education. For us on this side of the House, every child matters. And it is for that reason that we have, among other things, provide direct and targeted services. And again, I would refer to the boats, the buses, and the bicycles that were provided to some of our most disadvantaged communities, such as Pomeroon, Baracaro, Riverview, Bartica, Maracaibo, where our children are at greatest risk of being left behind. Mr. Speaker, I still remember vividly the example I shared as a minister of that child in Baracaro whose parent under the coalition was saving $5,000 a week in transportation. At a cost of approximately $1,000 a day. When you looked at it total, it represented more than $40,000 a month. Call it what you may, it is a measure. And it is measures such as these that will mitigate against perpetual intergenerational cycles of disadvantage. As a sector, education needs to seriously address the structural determinants of inequality, which includes poverty, deficient policies, and inefficient delivery of systems that prevent our children from realizing their full potential. As I conclude my presentation, Mr. Speaker, allow me to place on record a few thank yous. In light that this is my final budget presentation in this honorable House, of course, I begin by thanking none other than His Excellency former President Granger, who reposed in me the confidence to serve in this honorable House. I am forever grateful to the people of this country who afforded me the opportunity to serve them with professionalism, dignity, and accountability. I thank the coalition partners, Kemraj, for their unwavering support and guidance. I thank the former opposition leader, my friend and colleague, the Honorable Joseph Harmon, for his unwavering support. I thank each and every member in this honorable House for the commitment and dedication they bring each and every day, sometimes under the most difficult of circumstances. I thank my family, who has always held my back and who has supported every decision I have made. And so today, it is with those words that I part company and I conclude my contribution to Budget 2022. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And on my own behalf and on behalf of everyone, we thank you for the service you have provided to this Parliament and to this nation. Thank you very, very much. Honorable Minister of Education, the Honorable Priya Manik Chandra.